So hey everyone, welcome to Hacking the Coding Interview Part 2. This workshop, I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about how to make yourself stand out when you're getting your resume looked over. And after that, we'll be doing some resume reviews. And if you signed up for it, we'll be doing some mock interviews as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is what do recruiters typically look for when they're looking at your resume? We'll look at a lot of different things. One of the first things they'll probably look for is industry experience. Now, I know most of us don't have industry experience. A lot of people like haven't had internships yet, and especially this year, it's really challenging to get an internship. So, I don't think recruiters expect you necessarily to have an internship, but it does really help you out to have that experience. It shows that you've like worked in a workplace before, you can work in a team, and you have the skills you need to get an internship. So just having that on your resume is super important to make yourself, stand out amongst a wide pool of applicants. Um, However, like for example, if you did like nothing at your internship, it might actually not look that good to have that internship on your resume. It really depends on like what you actually accomplished. So you really want to make sure you highlight the accomplishments that you made at your internship on your resume. Another really important thing for your resume is to highlight your education and your coursework. So typically, it's smart to put the resume, or sorry, it's smart to put your education at the top of your resume because you want to basically show the recruiter, like, I went to this school and I had the prestige to go here. And you also want to highlight like the coursework that you took at that school. So, sometimes if you have a lot of experience, it's not super necessary to put your coursework. But typically, it is really smart to highlight what courses you've taken. So for example, if you're applying for a role that's like heavy in machine learning, you might want to highlight like, oh, I took this class to help me learn machine learning. So you should highlight your coursework on your resume if you have the space for it. But yeah, recruiters definitely look for your education. I think like they do look for, top 5 CS schools, which UCSD is not a top 5 CS school, but we're definitely like top 10, maybe top 15. So even just going to UCSD looks really good on your resume. So you really want to highlight both these things on your resume. So one thing that isn't like super necessary, but it will definitely help you out is to have some teaching experience. Teaching is a really good soft skill because it shows recruiters that you're able to explain a concept at a high level. It shows you have like a deep knowledge of a topic. So there's a lot of really good ways to get teaching experience at UCSD. For example, you could become a tutor for a CSE class. You could become a TA if you're, really smart and you're amazing at explaining a topic. But being a teacher in some way, hosting workshops too is a really good way. It just shows recruiters that you're able to explain a concept in high level, and yeah, it just looks really good. So one of the biggest parts of your resume is going to be the projects that you've worked on, especially if you don't have prior internship experience. You need ways to wait. Why is there so many chats? Okay, make sure everything's good. You need to make sure that like you stand out in one way or another if you don't have that prior internship experience. So there's a lot of ways you can do this, and I'm going to talk about each one of these I listed here. So first off, you have like your school projects that you worked on. School projects, everyone does a school project with CS, and I would say like you can put your school project on your resume, but I don't really super recommend putting the school project in your resume because everyone does a school project and it doesn't really make you stand out from like a super wide pool of applicants. So for example, I mean, if you have other projects that you've worked on, it's really good to highlight those over a school project because a recruiter can typically see like, oh, this is something like they definitely did in their object-oriented like basics class or like their data structures class. You want to make sure you do something unique and something that would stand out to the eyes of the recruiter. Another really good type of project that you can work on is, hackathon projects. So for example, if you went to like SD Hacks and you worked on a cool project, you can really highlight that in your resume. So for example, like my sophomore year, I went to SD Hacks before, COVID happened. And I worked on this project called Easy Study. And basically what it was a web app where you can take a picture of your notes. And what this app would do is it would parse your notes and look for like key terms using machine learning. So for example, if you're studying for a history test, you could parse out the words like Thomas Jefferson. And what it would do after it parses out these keywords, it would return like matching study documents. So it would go back into our database and see like, okay, do we have any resources about like Thomas Jefferson? And return that to like the user. So this is like, I put this on my resume and I still have it there, even though it's like almost a couple years old now. But just working on a project at Hackathon, it shows that you have like, interest beyond just your classroom and you're exploring the field of CS. So it's really good to have a hackathon project if, you don't have other sorts of projects on your resume. Another type of project you can work on is a research project. So, here at UCSD, it's known to be a really research heavy school, and there's tons of opportunities to get research projects done. So, if you're really close to professors, say you go to their office hours, you can ask like, hey, like, are you working on a research project? And maybe you can like work on that project with them. So, if you're really interested in research, I highly recommend like looking into a research project because that shows you're really adamant about a certain topic. You can also work on an open source project. So there's a really big open source community online. If you're really adamant about like some sort of open source tool, you can work on that actively and make pull requests if you fork the repository, and that just shows like the recruiter that you're really interested in something and you really want to improve something. It really would make you stand out amongst a lot of different applicants. And lastly, I think this is like the most important type of project, is having like an application with real world applications. So not everyone has an application like this. It's pretty rare actually for like someone to have like an application that has hundreds of users, for example. But if you do have something like that, something that you think like hundreds of users would use and you'd like to work on, consider doing that because it would really make you stand out. And I know it's kind of approaching like startup territory, but if you're interested in making something that people would actually use, but you're still interested in working at like a big company or a tech company, this would look really, really good on a resume. And then extracurriculars as well. So having extracurriculars, even just being an ACM, looks really good on a resume. It shows that you have, interests in CS beyond just the classroom. I have some sort of initiative. And for example, if you have like a board position or some sort of leadership position in an organization, it shows you have some level of responsibility. So it emphasizes your soft skills, for example, like working in teams. And it just shows that like you're more than just your coursework. You're more than just like your GPA. You have some sort of extra interests outside of just the classroom. So I wanted to give some general advice. There's a lot of great resume tips on ACM's, resume tips document, which I linked on the. I think I took the link actually, but if you want, someone wants to link that in the chat, that will have some great resume tips for you. But anyway, some general advice. If you have a GPA below a 3.0, I would recommend against putting that on your resume. I think in CS, honestly, like GPA is not super important. It's probably one of the less important things in your resume, but it does show like a level of worth ethic and a level of responsibility to have a good GPA. So like I said, like I think it would only be really nice to have your GPA on a resume if it's above a 3.0, but it's certainly not like the most important thing on your resume. Another thing is like less can be more. I know a lot of people like shorten their margins and like make their text really small in their resume, and I think that's personally like a big no-no sort of, because you don't want to fit too much information in your resume. You want your recruiter to see exactly like what you want them to see about you. If you just throw them a bunch of information, they can get overwhelmed, or they could just like look over your resume because there's just way too much to look at. So you want to try to keep things simple. You want to keep things concise. As I said in the next bullet, you want to be like really clear and concise about what you're trying to get across in your resume. So yeah, being clear also is super important. When you describe what you're doing at a job, you really want to make sure that a technical recruiter can understand what you're saying, because you can use all this technical jargon, but if they don't understand what you're saying, it's not going to look super impressive. You want to make sure that you can say something that like someone with like a minimal level of like technical understanding could sort of understand what you're doing. If you can't explain it to like a college student, or like another one of your peers, then it might be too complicated to put on a resume. You want to simplify that a little bit. I also think it's really important to emphasize the impact that you make, because if you actually accomplish something, that's like that stands out to a recruiter. If you make a difference, that would really show a recruiter like, oh, like this person made an impact, and there's someone we'd want to have on our team to also make an impact. So you really want to emphasize in most of your bullets in your resume that you've actually done something that can make a difference. Um, Also, cover letters. So a lot of people have mixed opinions on cover letters. Personally, I think that having a cover letter is unnecessary in most cases, especially if you're applying to like a big name company like Fang. They're probably not going to take the time to look at your cover letter. They're probably going to look at your resume and decide right after that whether or not they're going to move forward with an OA with you. So, if you really want to work for a company and you're really adamant about the company, feel free to write a cover letter for them. But to be honest, 9 times out of 10, the recruiter's probably not going to look at the cover letter. So you can use your time spent in a lot of other ways, but that's not the best way to use it. Um, and then the last thing that I think is super important is just to keep trying. It's super important just to not give up when you're applying to internships. I've applied to like a ton of internships, and I haven't even secured one for next summer yet. I'm hoping that I'm going to intern for this one company, but you just got to keep trying. Like you got to keep applying, and especially this year, it's super competitive. It's very cutthroat. There's a lot of really competitive candidates, and it's hard to stand out amongst the rest. But you can't give up there just because there's a lot of people applying. We are CS, and CS is in high demand. So even if you don't get an internship, even in undergrad, that doesn't mean necessarily you're not going to get a job after college. You just got to keep trying, keep applying, and put that work in. And I know like pretty much everyone here is taking the time to go to this workshop and learn more about how to improve their resume, and that's already showing like you're putting in the effort to get a good job, get a good internship. So I do believe in all you guys, and I'm sure all of you guys can get what you want. So before we go on to the resume review section, I'd like to talk about some good resumes, for examples. So I pulled out a couple resumes. This one's from a very accomplished person. So as you can see, they've interned at a lot of different companies. They've entered at Element AI. They've been a TA. They worked at this company called Gentech, I think, Ubisoft. So they have a lot of different experience. But I really want to talk about like the format of this resume specifically. So they start off with they have their name above here. I cut it off, but they start off with their education, and it's pretty short. They went to the University of Sherbrooke, I guess. They studied computer science, and it's super clear like when they started and when they graduated. That's all the information they needed. Now they didn't include their coursework on here, which in some cases like you'd want to include your coursework, but in this case, this person interned at 4 different companies, I think. So that already showed 3 different companies. They that shows like they have a lot of experience. They've done a lot of different things. They don't really need to have their coursework to make them stand out. But if you're someone who doesn't really have that much internship experience, it might be better to include that coursework and show what kind of fields that you've been studying. Um, Another thing that I really liked about this resume was that how they have their titles. So they have the company and then they have their role. It's very clear what they did, or what their position was. And then they also highlight the languages that they use at their job. So you can see here this person used a wide variety of languages for this position. They use C++ here. They use all these languages. So if I'm a recruiter and I'm looking at this resume, the first thing I want to know is like what technologies are they using in their products that we also use at our company right here. And it's super clear how they do it. I really like it. It's very minimalistic and it gets the message across. I also really liked how they emphasize the impact in their bullet points. So, for example, they worked on infrastructure automation with an operating system, but specifically they say it enabled teams to quickly build and deliver AI products. So that right there is something that they accomplished at their internship, and it's very clear what they did. On their next bullet, they do the same thing. They say they eliminated the need for one of the most common kinds of support tickets. It's super clear exactly what they did and what they accomplished at their internship. And they follow the same pattern for all of their bullets. Another really good thing is to use numbers. So, for example, this person said they've reduced build times by up to 70%. Like, that's a really good metric right there because it shows, oh, like they made this like measurable accomplishment at this company. So whenever you build your resume, you want to really keep impact in mind, especially for like each bullet. You don't need it for every single bullet if you want to emphasize like the technology you worked on, but showing that impact is like super important. It really stands out to recruiters. They put their skills at the bottom. One thing I recommend also is putting your skills closer to the bottom because you could say you have proficiency in C sharp or C++ and Rust, but by the time I get all the way down here, I can already see by like all the stuff they work on, they have this proficiency. You want to show them that you already have that like skills and you have like the bullet points to prove it really. You describe exactly what you did with these technologies. So by the time they get down here, they're like, oh, okay, I could see this person actually has experience in these things. You don't need to just tell them what you have experience in. And then this person only has a little bit of sections for their projects, but as you can tell, most of their information is on their experience section because they have a ton of experience. So I'm gonna go to the next resume. This resume I also really liked. It's a bit of a different format, so they went with the 2-column format compared to the 1-page format like this, or the 1-column format like this. And they separate it by work experience and awards and honors on the left side, and then they have their projects, technical skills, and education on the right side. So one thing about this person that makes them different from this person is that they have a lot more project experience. They worked on all these different things, like whatever OpenMind is, this lab, RoboSub, Juntos. These are all really cool projects this person took the time to work on, and it really stands out because they have their own experience, but they also work on projects, and they really wanted to emphasize both those things at the same time. So if you have a lot of projects that you've worked on, they'd really like to highlight. A 2-column format might be better for you. However, it's really up to like however you want to do it. Also, this person has a ton of experience as well. They're an intern at Facebook, or they're an ML engineer actually at Facebook. They were a full stack engineer with Trexo Robotics. So, um, obviously they're very well accomplished. But they also have like some metrics to emphasize their impact as well. So for example, they built a budget allocator that sends out 100 million ads daily. Like that's insane. Like 100 million ads daily from like something that they worked on themselves. That's really cool. Like you can tell they made a really visible impact. This one, like another time where they use percentages, they saved the company 60% in its machine learning costs. They reduced missed detections by 20%, 25%. Like these are like visible impacts this person made in their resume. So as you can see, like if I was a recruiter and I saw these metrics, I'd think like, wow, this is really impressive. Like they made a visible impact. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna skip this one because we're already a little low on time. We're already over the 15-minute budget I put for this presentation. But if you guys want to see some more resume tips, I hyperlink this link again. I put it in the Hack School Part 1, but these are just all of the ACM resume tips for improving your resume. So this is composed by Kendall, Bryce, and Alistair. Really great material. I highly recommend like taking the time to read through all this because I think it's perfectly done and it has a lot of really good advice in it. So now that we've finished the presentation section, we're going to lead us into the resume review section. So if you guys filled out the form already, we can split you guys up into breakout rooms. I'm reading the chat right now. I just saw this. I'm actually going to stop the recording here because we're going to start doing resume review. All right, do you want to start?